Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for our 2020 Census Kickoff. Sorry to be so formal, but we are recording this on Easthampton Media, so I want to make sure everybody's aware of that. I believe it's live right now, and then we'll get it up on YouTube and all the social medias. And I'm really excited. I want to thank Easthampton Media for doing that, because we really want to spread the word about the census. It only happens every 10 years. It's easy to forget about. It's easy to forget how important it is. And especially this year, you can fill it out online. A lot of people are going to be filling it out online for the first time. We want to make sure that people are comfortable doing that and that they do that. And we're going to touch on a few things today about how important it is. And we're going to hear from Paul Mark, State Representative from the town of Peru, who chairs the House of Representatives in Massachusetts Redistricting Committee. And the census is going to determine our representation, which is so important for us out here in Western Massachusetts, as we're already so outnumbered. We want to make sure that we have an accurate number. And that, those numbers are used for local representation in the city council precincts. They're used for your state representation. Each state rep has about the same number of people. State senators have about the same number of people. And for our federal representation as well, we want to make sure that Easthampton and Western Mass is well represented. And then we're also going to hear from Pat Boudreaux, and I want to thank him for being here from the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And I want to also just touch upon the fact of how important the census is because of money. A lot of funding, a lot of grants. You need a certain amount of people to be eligible for a grant. We'll get some facts and figures. I think the federal government has $675 billion that's attached to an accurate census. And we want as much money of that money as possible coming to Easthampton and coming to Western Mass. So we'll get into some of those facts and figures in a minute as well. But I want to thank you again for being here. And I want to thank the mayor for being here. I'm going to turn it over to her right now to welcome us here also.
Thank you, Representative Carey, and welcome, Mr. Boudreaux and Representative Mark. Also, thank you to members of our community who are attending today, which also include school committee member Lori Garcia, President of City Council Peg Conniff, and City Councilor Tom Peake. Representative Carey's words just kind of struck at home when we're talking about everyone in Easthampton needs to be counted. In this past year, there were 3 grants around housing and additional benefits for elders that we did not qualify for because of our population. When I looked on the state website of our population and then on census data, there was about an 800-person spread for various reasons. But that difference in not being able to clarify it put us out of contentious for really important social services, but also housing. And anybody who's been in Easthampton, and certainly Representative Carey has heard, as well as I have, housing is really a crisis in Easthampton. So I thank our delegation for coming and leading the charge, not just here in Easthampton, but across the state. And I also welcome the partnership of Pioneer Valley Planning Commission for helping us get through, make sure everybody is counted, and you have several ways to do that, and I'm sure we're going to hear from Representative Mark, facts, figures, and how we get this done. Representative Mark, if you could come up to the podium. You don't want those.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, for having us here and hosting us in this beautiful City Hall. Thank you, Representative Carey, for putting these together. As the chair of the Committee on Redistricting, we've been having these events all over the state, and so we put it out to all the members of the House if they were interested in hosting one, so it's really great to see Representative Carey as a new member really taking the initiative, making sure this town and another community we're going to go to later in his district aren't forgotten. Obviously, he's been a great addition to the delegation and becoming a good friend already, and filling in the relatively small shoes but large pace of Representative Sybeck from before, who was a more slight gentleman, but a great guy as well. So we're really glad to have you here, although we do miss John as well. So redistricting, what is redistricting? Redistricting is literally how do we redraw the lines for the House, the Senate, the Governor's Council, and the U.S. House of Representatives. And this was one of the original things in the Constitution that was debated and discussed. And when you look back traditionally through history and you consider how were political boundaries redrawn, you're talking about wars, you're talking about bloodshed, you're talking about families intermarrying, secret treaties between nobility, a lot of things that John Adams, specifically from Massachusetts, had seen happening in Europe and wanted to make sure we avoided here in the new country, the United States. And so one of the first things in the Constitution, Article 1, Section 2, Clause 3, provides, the actual enumeration shall be made within 3 years after the first meeting of the Congress of the United States, and within every subsequent term of 10 years, in such manner as they shall by law direct. And so since 1790, every 10 years, the country has had a census, and then following that census, those numbers are transmitted to both the clerk of the U.S. House of Representatives and to the individual states for us to then take those numbers and redraw the lines. And so when we looked first at Congress, we remember back 10 years ago, Massachusetts, our population grew, but it didn't grow quickly enough. And so we lost our member of Congress. We lost out here John Olver. Congressional District 1 was removed from the entire state and divided amongst the other 9 districts. It looks like the good news this time is that we should not face a similar situation. Population is growing in Massachusetts. Estimate is that statewide the population growth is about 5%. And again, that makes us, if we hold up and we get a full and accurate count, it makes it that it is very unlikely that we'll lose a member of Congress. Here's the bad news for us here in Western Massachusetts. Most of that growth is driven by Suffolk County. So 11.8% growth rate in Suffolk County. Suffolk County is Boston and the 3 small cities that surround it. Over 70,000 people have moved into Boston in the last 9 years. So now when we look out here in Western Massachusetts, numbers are nowhere near as strong here in Congressional District 1, Congressional District 2 right up the street, and over in Congressional District 9, which is Cape Cod and south coast of Massachusetts. In Hampshire County, we estimate that the growth is only 2.07%. We estimate Hampshire County has a population of about 161,355 people. For Easthampton specifically, we estimate there is actually a decline of 0.41%, and so the population estimate for Easthampton is going to be about 15,987. And like Representative Carey has mentioned, that means that affects our voice. It affects our voice in Boston. It affects our voice in Washington, D.C. as well. It also affects the Electoral College. How we pick the president is determined by adding the numbers of members of Congress, the House, and the Senate together. And so when we think about that, we have to make sure that we get a full and complete count of Easthampton and every other town in Hampshire County and all of Western Massachusetts, because we can't afford to lose any more representation than we might already lose in the face of small growth or even decline. In Berkshire County, where I live, we're looking at 3.7% decline. My town, I think it grew by 3 people. You know, I live in a town of 850 people. I have over 16 communities now. Representative Carey has 4. We don't want that to grow unnecessarily, because the more towns we pick up, through no fault of our own, the more select boards, the more city councils, the more mayors we have to deal with, the more people. We estimate that the baseline for a House district is going to grow from about 41,000 in the last census to 45,000 in the coming. So without counting a single person, each of us needs to find 4,000 people. And when you're looking at a decline or very slow growth, that becomes difficult to do. And that makes us less accessible to the people we serve, which is something we don't want to happen. In the state Senate, we estimate growth from about 164,000 in 2010 to about 181,000 in the new districts. And in the U.S. House, the last census, the districts were divided almost exactly at 727,514 or 727,515. We estimate this time it'll be closer to 766,905. So again, Congressman Neal, that's 87 communities right now. Congressman McGovern, over 50. As those districts grow, the chances of seeing them at events becomes less and less likely, and it's not anything that they're doing. It's just math and logistics. Secretary Galvin is our official liaison to the census for Massachusetts. He has said at events like this that he feels that this is his 3rd time doing the census, and this will be the most difficult one that he has undertaken. There's a number of reasons for that. Some of that will be that it will be the first online census. Some will be just a general distrust of government that always exists, I think, and always has. And some will be some of the political atmosphere right now. Some things that have been said over the last year that might have a chilling effect on certain groups wanting to fill out their reports. To combat this and to help Secretary Galvin as we undertake these efforts, the House and Senate passed in our state budget over $2.5 million in grants that were available for local complete count committees to apply for and to help with these outreach efforts. And so, again, I'm really pleased that we're having an event here. This is about number 30 that we've had all over the state. And over the next month or so, we're going to do everything we can to continue making sure that we get a full and accurate count in Easthampton and all over Massachusetts. So thank you again for having me. And now, with pleasure, I will introduce Mr. Patrick Beaudry of the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission. And I will happily answer questions afterwards about redistricting as asked.
Thank you, Chairman. Maya Angelou said, "Do the best you can with what you know until you know better, and when you know better, do better." we believe at the Pioneer Valley Planning Commission, this is embodied in our decennial census. It is our ability as a government, the national, state, and local level, to understand who's living in our communities, where, and some critical demographic information that helps inform our decisions in terms of resources and political allocation, as Chairman Mark and his predecessors just noted. I want to focus a lot on how do we get people to fill out the census. I think we've covered some good ground on why it matters. The Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is the regional convener of the Pioneer Valley Complete Count Committee. A Complete Count Committee is simply a unit of support for census participation at the local, regional, or state level. We fulfill this role not because we're wildly popular or have huge followerships, that we have customers or clients who are coming in by the hundreds or thousands each week. It's because we're really good at bringing a lot of people who do that stuff together in a room to work as one region to get the job done. As Chairman Mark mentioned earlier, this is the first online census, and there's a lot of fear and complications that go along with that. We believe that it is going to be a barrier for seniors, for rural residents who might not yet have the internet access they need. We know that our immigrant community is concerned with the citizen question that was previously discussed, but ultimately decided by the courts not to be included. We know people with disabilities are going to have a tough time completing the census online as well. And so we are working with those groups who interact with all of these different hard-to-count communities, as they're known in our census lingo, to develop plans to overcome these barriers. For many, that's going to mean setting up questionnaire assistance centers. These are simply computer banks or drop-in sites where different constituencies can find a place with people who have been trained to help them assist in that participation, get the job done, fill it out, and ensure that for each person we count, we're getting about $2,340 per year over the course of a decade. We are always recruiting new members. We're blessed to have really engaged local governments here in the Valley who understand what's at stake. We're really blessed to have human service providers who understand these are Head Start dollars, these are community development block grant dollars. As the mayor noted, these numbers become very real very quickly when you start grant writing. And so as the regional planning agency, we want the best count possible, and not just selfishly for those dollars and the political representation that comes with it, but so we are able to make the most informed decisions on a regional level as well. So I'm also happy to answer any questions. We've been working really closely with the Census Bureau, with Secretary Galvin's office, and others, and we really appreciate the opportunity to share that with the Easthampton community tonight. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for being here and for that info. You know, it's shocking for us to hear that Easthampton is estimated to be in a decline, because we feel like Easthampton is growing every day. So it just goes to show how important this is. And maybe we'll prove those numbers wrong, but we got to make sure that everybody is filling out this census, and we can make sure that every single person and every single child is counted. So if there's any questions, we should be able to just field them, and these microphones should pick you guys up. And if there are no questions, that's okay too.
Somebody, I think, 4 rows back.
Wow.
Always.
I think it's important to add, as we talk about money, and I believe both Pat and Rep Carey mentioned this, $675 billion is allocated in federal funding through the census numbers, but it also affects hundreds of state and federal programs, and the estimate is that for each person that does not fill out the census in a community, it costs their community $2,300 each year for the next 10 years. And if the numbers that we get in the census are wrong, we are stuck with them until 2030. So that is 10 years. So we want to make sure that we get the best and most accurate count that we can. Yes, please.
So the $2,300, where does that land? Does that fall into your budget, or?
It's an amalgamation of every dollar that is eligible and determined by census per capita.
Okay.
So it can be Medicare money, it can be community development block grants, it can be Chapter 90, it can be a lot of
So it
different
doesn't
things.
land in our lap, it's just the way we operate per person and the expenses that we have per person? Is that?
It's not necessarily that $2,000 will show up every year because
Right.
you filled out your census, but it's 2,000 that's not lost, that we're ineligible for that decade.
Gotcha.
Right.
Okay.
Yep, very good.
So what is it that we local elected officials and whatnot can be doing sort of on a day-to-day basis over the course of the next few months to help support this mission?
Let me just repeat the question in case the camera didn't get it. What can we be doing in the community as local elected officials, as community members? What can we be doing to spread this word and make sure that folks are aware the census is coming up?
Yeah, so I think I alluded to it a little bit. The Pioneer Valley Planning Commission is very often a behind-the-scenes agency, right? We kind of do that quiet, long-term work that doesn't always necessarily get the public's attention. You're an elected official. You're going to public events. You're hosting public events. And so I think you can really use your platform to spread that word and be someone who can lend your credibility to the census and explain the importance of participating to your constituents.
I understand the importance of the census and I'm all for helping, but I also wonder when families register their children for school or when people pay taxes, isn't there a way of the government cross-referencing to see if those people have already filled out a census? It seems like if you don't fill out the census, there should be other ways of counting people.
I think I would love that, for that to be in place. And I'm glad you brought up children because young children are historically one of the most undercounted populations in the country. For whatever reason, when parents are filling out their census, they don't think that their 2-year-old counts because for whatever reason, right? But that means for 10 years, the community in which you reside is not getting proper funding for the school district that your child might be attending, the Head Start programs, all these programs that we benefit from. And so I certainly wish there were better ways to capture this information. So far, the online is what we've kind of come up with to modernize the process. It's a huge undertaking. And I think, you know, it's something worth noting, but this is the process we're dealing with this year.
Yeah, and so, excuse me. Wow. So the Census Bureau is hoping that people will fill out their census online. But that being said, that is how you are encouraged to self-report. You will still receive something in the mail. If you do not wish to or you are unable to fill it out online, you can still fill out a paper form. You can still phone in. There are over, I believe, 12 different languages available for phone-in people that want to call in to fill out their census. God bless you. And then as the census determines who has not filled out, because their data is all based on addresses, they don't know where the people are, they know where the addresses are, they will begin to send census takers, as always has happened, to kind of figure out. But they're hoping for more of a self-report, self-response rate. And then it's funny that you asked that question because something completely different is important to mention, and that is that the census not only cannot get information from other agencies to supplement themselves, they can't share the information they receive with any other agencies, including law enforcement, including, oh, I live in Florida for 3 months in the winter and I register my car down there. Don't worry about it. Nobody's going to come after you for taxes. It's important to fill out your census where you reside most of the year, and we hope that's here in Western Massachusetts.
Yeah, I was going to add, you know, we've had some of these kickoff events in college towns, and there's the fear of the college students who are kind of doubled up, tripled up in an apartment where maybe their name's not on the lease. And it's the same thing. It's reported by Census Track. It's not like your landlord can look up how many people were reported in this. And so we really encourage self-reporting to make sure that even if you won't be there for 10 years, you represent the students who may be there for 10 years. And I think the other important piece to that is, for those of you who do not want a census enumerator to knock on your door, if you're the type of person who is uncomfortable with strangers coming to your door, one of the best ways to avoid that is to fill it out before then. So get it done when these things hit in mid-March, and you don't have to worry about the enumerators coming out in mid-April.
I think it's also important to note that that's the last step for the census. You'll get a letter, then you'll get your census in the mail, you'll get instructions about how to do it online. People aren't going door to door right now. So if you're nervous about getting fooled. There's things you can check on. You know, the census takers will never ask you for money. They'll never ask you about your political party. You know, there's certain things, if it seems like there's a red flag, then you want to use your common sense about that. But if you go to the census website, they very clearly say, beginning of March, we're going to send you a letter. Middle of March, we're going to send you a census. If we're going to send you a reminder a month later, a month after that, someone's going to knock on your door. And so I think Pat makes a great point. Just as soon as you get it, fill it out and forget about it for 10 years.
So what is the time frame? So 1st of March is when it initially kind of kicks off, and then you were saying month later. So what's the end? Like, is there a time frame that at the end of, pick a date, is when all the numbers get thrown into a bucket and somebody's crunching the numbers to come up with the final?
The numbers have to be reported to the President of the United States by December 31st, and then the numbers have to be sent to us in the legislature by March 31st of next year. The official census date, so this really applies to if you evenly split your time between two places, April 1st is where you sleep that night, is where you're supposed to allocate yourself. And I believe the census takers should be done by July, is the timeline I heard.
Oh, thank you.
Awesome. If there's no more questions, thank you so much for coming. Is there a certain website people should go to, or is it just census.us?
Census, 2020 census, is it, wait, don't we have a
It's not on there. I was looking. But you can reach out to your local state rep if you have any more questions.
Census2020.gov, I believe.
Awesome.
2020census.gov.
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 Perfect. Awesome. Thank you for
Thank you.
coming. Thank you guys
Thank
for coming.
you.
I'd love to get a group photo with
Yes.
all of us in the census sign.
Thank you.
You guys are in
30th event, and I can
Oh, we're taking
website, right?